Hey, Henry.
Morning.
All right, welcome everybody. Open the meeting 8/12, May 7th. Thank you everyone for making time today. Looks like we do have quorum. We will proceed. First order of business is consideration of approval of the minutes from April 2nd. We have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, do we have any citizens with us today for the citizen comment? Before we begin staff reports and presentations, just want to acknowledge Victoria's accomplishment and her renewed and ever consistent commitment to her craft and being successfully certified for her, I forgot the name of it, Texas Certified Economic Developer. So grateful for your continued commitment to, again, your craft and super proud. Congratulations.
Inaugural class.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, so Victoria, we'll turn it over to you and Lon.
Okay. For staff reports and presentations, we actually have a special guest with us today. Matt Creel is from Opportunity Austin. He's our partner up north, and he is the policy and advocacy vice president. So he primarily deals and works with, keeping track of the bills that are going through the legislature and mainly focusing on those that affect economic development among all of them. But I asked him to come and give an update to the board on those that we should keep an eye out and how they're going and what his feeling is for how it's going this.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I think I already have given him a brief update on the makeup of our board, but to meet everybody.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself and just tell him who you're with and your company.
Sure. Spencer with Premier Group Consulting, and it is my first time serving on this board.
Spencer Copeland, DRS Consulting, and does disaster recovery and preparedness consulting services. Serve here on the Planning and Zoning Commission for these libraries.
Julian Hernandez, owner of an ice cream shop called La Ola Pop Shop here in town. Been doing business here about 8 years.
I'm Yafa. I'm the Dean of Public and Social Services at Austin Community.
Morning, Lauren Lyons, Economic Development for the City of Pat.
Mike Camerlander, president of the Hayes Caldwell UD.
Eric Wright, I'm the superintendent for Hayes CISD.
Hi, good morning. I'm Luke Miller. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Assumption City. Henry Sear, Curative Healthcare, it's in Austin, and I've been on the board since this fall.
Eddie Brown, Athlete Performance Solutions, and have been on the board 5 years now. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate the invite. I know some of you already are familiar with Opportunity Austin, and while I'm going through that, I suppose take one of those and then show other parts as well. But we are the Regional Economic Development Partnership, covering the 5-county traditional MSA. So, we represent a group of investors, which are members of the business community, like all of you are, but also work with different regional partners throughout that 5-county territory, as well as parternering with some of the regional groups on the periphery of that as well, the mega region, San Antonio, and all the way around that. So, as Victoria said, I handle public policy advocacy work along with our senior VP of Comms and External Affairs, Stacy Schmidt. And so for the last several months, we have been rather busy and occupied with the legislative session. When we're not in session, we are engaging at the local level, and trying to hit that full 5-county territory as best as we can. given the 5 commissioners courts, 20 some odd municipalities that we work closely with. But so we are privileged to have great relationships with groups like this one, with staff that is, as you said, committed to their craft and great to work with. So we appreciate that partnership, appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. So a quick, I think, kind of general session overview. Some of you all, maybe pay really close attention. Some of you, for good reason, maybe don't want to pay attention at all. Totally get it. The session is 140 days every 2 years. So where we are at in the calendar right now, there are 27 days left, including today, plus or minus 1 for calculation errors, maybe. And kind of the broad view of things. Started the session understanding that there's always only one thing that you have to do, which is pass a 2-year budget, and then add your political dynamics on top of that. So the obvious conversation going into the session was the discussion about the education savings accounts. That has been finished. The governor had his signing ceremony 10 days ago-ish, something like that. Maybe not even that. Maybe
Last
this past
Saturday.
weekend, right?
Election day.
So the budget is in conference, which is just where the House and the Senate meet and negotiate on the differences and try and come to a reconciliation. So hopefully that will be wrapping up soon. So in theory, you have already accomplished the 2 things that everybody went into the session saying these are just the 2 things that is going to be required to be done, both constitutionally and from a political lens. May 15th, coming up next week, will be the last day for the House to pass House bills on what's called second reading. All you really need to know from that is May 15th, any House bill that has not had at least one vote on the House floor is effectively dead. So the House is in a little bit of kind of crisis mode, I guess. Everybody's trying to move their agenda items forward, which means the House calendar begins to grow. So almost anything not on the calendar within the next few days is highly at risk. My wife was rather astonished last night that they were still about 40 bills away from the end of the calendar at 10 o'clock or whatever it was. So that's the schedule that we live in for the next week and a half or whatever it is, morning to evening, just churning through House bills to try and beat that deadline. The document that was passed around is Opportunity Austin's policy principles, and then at the bottom is what we identified as our top 5 legislative priorities. We developed this over the course of about a year with a group, similar to this, where we just went through and discussed kind of what are some of the major, legislative regulatory issues generally. What are some of the major issues in this particular region for economic development in general? So kind of covering all these different bases and came up with this. The functionality of the principles is to give us a way to calibrate, how we would engage, where we would stand on issues that fall outside of that top 5. Functionality for that top 5 is to say, this is where the focus of our work is going to be, right? We certainly pay attention to and care about those things that are on the periphery, but we are, it's less necessary for us to spend a lot of time and shoot leather on those issues, depending on where, these top 5 items sit. So it's just designed to keep our work as focused as possible. As will happen in a legislative session, that top 5 expanded slightly to sort of be an unofficial, I guess, kind of top 6. I'll cover that here in a little bit. But what I really want to do today is just run through kind of some major items in each of those top 5 to 6 buckets. Certainly really interested in answering questions that you all have as we go through that. Feel free to lob them out. So that first priority item, to maintain support for the JEDI Chapter 403 program. Most of you all probably all familiar with the old Chapter 313 program, which went away, sunset. Last session, the legislature passed House Bill 5, which created this JEDI program.
Hold on, Matt, let's take a step back. I don't think that's a safe assumption, actually. So 313 was
Okay.
school property tax incentives for large projects. So just want to
No, that's probably appreciate that. Yeah, I'll probably operate on a little bit of assumed knowledge, so feel free to, like I said, stop next questions. Yeah, 313 was what you used to hear about when a project would come, typically large projects, and they would get a school tax abatement for that investment. That went away for a number of reasons. The legislature replaced that with the Jobs, Energy, Technology, and Innovation Act, JEDI, which is also called Chapter 403. Substantially trimmed down version of Chapter 313 in a lot of ways. And as the 2 years since the legislature passed that ensued, they implemented the rules for how that would work. 14, I believe, applications came in for that. 2 were officially finalized and announced. I think there's 2 others that are at or near the finish line. And as you go through that process, you start to identify things that, well, this could be better, right? Or if this had been different, then this project or that project would have come to, Kyle, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, wherever.
a lot of things.
A lot of things, yeah. So.
Were any of the two, were any of the two in the region? That were
No, one was in Houston, one was in Bell Helicopter was in the Fort Worth, kind of north, kind of Denton area. There have not been any of those 14 applications that were in this region. The closest one was the Francis Foundry. It's a semiconductor thing over in Bryan, near the Texas A&M campus.
We got this close to putting one in, but we didn't
I know there have
for
been
reasons.
numerous discussions of projects that would have come here or
Yeah.
in San Antonio. There are still currently a number of projects that different partners throughout the region have said have potential. Some of those, I think, are waiting to see what sort of adjustments happen in the legislature this time around to see if the JEDI program becomes more competitive. So that was the goal. This session was to take those corrections that we received from site selectors, from regional partners that are working these projects, and find areas where the JEDI program is currently potentially seen as uncompetitive and kind of help improve that. So there were multiple bills filed on that. Most of them took very sort of narrow incremental approaches to how to address some of these things. We're going to try and change these 2 things, these 4 things. House Bill 105 emerged as the primary vehicle, which is a much larger package of corrections that a number of stakeholders came together and said, here's almost the laundry list of things that we'd like to see changed. Let's just put them all in a bill and see what happens. That I think the highlights of that bill are exempting dispatchable generation projects from what's called the compelling factor. So the JEDI program, as established, said you have to demonstrate that this incentive is the compelling factor, the reason that you are locating in Texas versus New Mexico, New York, wherever. Adjusting wage calculations, essentially, the program says if you do a project, you have to pay, X% of the median wage of, however you define that. There have been some various concerns with how that's calculated, so just making some adjustments to that.
And that was ours, right? So we had a manufacturing project this was Caldwell County, and JEDI would have required $100,000 for a manifacturing job to qualify. It was just like, that's not reality.
Yeah.
And they were paying like 76, which for Caldwell County is really great, but it didn't qualify for JEDI. It's just insanity.
Yeah, there were some, I think, dispatchable energy projects where the way that that wage calculation was done would have meant that everybody working at that thing had to be paid like $220,000, which is, and that, that's not in the downtown core of Austin, right? It's like out in West Texas, in a rural county where that was essentially fortunate. So some of those projects don't pencil, as you can imagine. And then correcting the definition of kind of which jobs those wage requirements would apply to. That gets a little bit technical, but those projects have to commit to hiring a certain number of jobs based on where they're putting their project. That minimum number of jobs is not all right. You might have to, minimum number of jobs you have to hire is going to be 20, but it might be a manufacturing facility that's going to employ 100 people. So does that $100,000 minimum salary apply to all 100 people or just those 20 that you're required to create? So lots of little technical kinds of things. But we are anticipating that will be voted out of a House committee fairly soon, decently well enough in advance of that upcoming timeline that I mentioned, so that we will see some progress. Chapter 380, that second item, Chapter 380 and 381. Those chapters, primarily local, entirely local economic development programs for different rebates of sales taxes, potentially property taxes. However, Kyle or Hayes County or wherever wants to structure those. In past several sessions, and this session is no different, has had a number of different challenges trying to restructure how those work. One particular bill that passed through the Senate, Senate Bill 878 by Senator Birdwell, who's from the Fort Worth area, and Fort Worth, Waco kind of area, would make considerable changes to how 380s are done, limiting the amount of time that you could have a 380 in place to a 10-year period with a couple of kind of 5-year extensions, preventing property tax from being the source of funds through which the incentive is allocated. So certainly some concerns from our perspective, from our regional partners' perspectives, on how that would impact their ability to do 380s at all, much less negotiate 380s that make sense for the needs of Kyle, the needs of San Marcos, the needs of Georgetown, wherever. So we have worked on that bill, continue to monitor it. We think we're in a good place with how that will turn out, but strange things happen. There are a handful of other bills on the 380 issues that we continue to watch in terms of how they impact some of those are focused on an ability of a local entity to do renewable energy, which is itself is a large political project. The third item, the R&D tax credit, is one of the highest priorities for us this session. It's an extension of the existing R&D tax credit program with some improvements added in to streamline that process, help it apply to more businesses than it did in the past. It is a credit against certain research and development expenditures that a business would make. The statute kind of provides definitions and details what those qualifying expenditures would be. That existing tax credit would expire at the end, would sunset at the end of 2026. So this reauthorization is, we would say, and a coalition of stakeholders that we're working would say is very, very essential for innovation growth in the state of Texas, and not even just for new companies, but for existing companies. We have heard from several companies who said, if this does not happen, if you don't reauthorize and extend this, then that will severely impact or prevent our ability to expand our new HQ the way that we want to. And we kind of sort of banked on that a couple years ago built it, or we've been doing this great life sciences, biomedical research and development stuff for 5 or 10 years. Texas is the place because of that R&D tax credit. That goes away, you might have to look at other options. So very, very important item for our priority list.
How big is the tax credit?
What's the new, like all tax bills, it gets a little tricky, but the new proposal in SB 2206, which so it's a Senate bill, it has passed the Senate, it's in a House committee. We're hoping for a hearing soon. I want to say that puts the tax credit at 8.5% of, I think that's percentage of your expenditures can be credited to offset your franchise tax liability. And then there's also like, you can only offset X percent of your franchise tax liability, but if you go over that, there's carry forwards. So a lot of different wrinkles in there. And if you have, I should say, I passed out my cards for that. If you have additional questions about any of these that you want to talk about offline, happy to. So yeah, we're hoping that'll have a House hearing soon. It's already halfway through the process, so we're on a tight schedule, but not as tight as electricity. So item number 4 says he speaks specifically about dispatchable power and affordability. There's a couple of items here I think to talk about. Electric power is probably the number one thing that our project team gets asked about when we do recruitment trips. Every company they meet with says, are you gonna have the power for us to set up our manufacturing facility or our office building? So I think there's a couple of critical issues being discussed. One is a framework for regulating how large loads like data centers, manufacturing facilities, et cetera, would integrate with the grid. And in particular, if they are using what's called behind the meter generation, so they're installing their own solar power or even natural gas fired generation on their premises to power their equipment, how does that generation interact with the rest of the grid? We have largely stayed out of that conversation and just monitored it, but it is moving. And then the other one is incentivizing the development of nuclear energy resources. And that includes funding for R&D of technologies and infrastructure, workforce training programs, and more. As you've probably heard or seen in papers, whatever your news source is, nuclear is increasingly an option that people are looking at as a way to address the need for additional power generation in a potentially greener way, more environmentally responsible. So OA has supported several of those nuclear energy focused bills, and like I said, remain neutral on the kind of larger question of grid functionality, the sort of administrative process of how ERCOT handles those sorts of things. This is where the agenda priorities expanded a little bit. This would be, I guess, item 4B, which is water. That originally was just like an infrastructure item, and it primarily focused on electricity, but water has certainly been an important part of the conversation. So we sort of made that an add-on item there just because of the frequency that it was coming up. That is also talked about a lot in recruitment. Water, and I know you all are talking about that a lot here as well. Where's the water going? Where's the new water coming from? How are we utilizing it effectively? So there's several different things happening there. The House's supplemental budget, which is the budget from last session that was passed, they're estimating that budget kind of 2 years in advance. This is what we think the state's budget for 2 years is going to be. When that end of that 2 years comes up, you look and you say, here were some unexpected expenses that we had. So now we got to fund those. We still have a pot of money left over for various reasons. What are we going to put that money towards? $2.5 billion of that is going to go into the Texas Water Fund. that was established last session, which provides funding for a variety of programs the Water Development Board operates, infrastructure improvement, new water supply projects. Some of it's grants, some of it is low interest loans. So that's another considerable chunk of cash going into that policy priority. And then additional bills for this session are being negotiated to create a dedicated revenue stream. So traditionally, those water projects have generally been funded off of lump cash infusions like the $2.5 billion. And they'll just say, let's see where this takes us for the next, 5-10 years, whatever it is. Because of the growing need and concern about water, they said we need to create a dedicated revenue stream for this, the same way that we have for roads and a number of other things. So the one thing so far that the House and Senate seem to agree on is that they want to put about $1 billion a year in dedicated funds going into water projects. The difference is in how. Where does that money come from? Is that purely from sales tax? Is it from some other, accumulation of different revenue sources the state has? How long are we going to provide that funding? One chamber suggests 10 years, the other says 16. They'll figure out kind of where that number actually ends. So they are moving different bills, and then they will go through that conference committee process we talked about to kind of settle on the differences there. Generally, from our perspective, we have supported pretty much all of those approaches under the theory that doing something is better than what we've been doing, right? So progress is good. And then there's a number of other bills promoting ASR projects, which is aquifer storage and recovery, taking treated wastewater, dumping it into an aquifer and utilizing that for various different water needs to retreat it or use it for non-potable uses. And then there's a number of different bills on kind of administrative changes on how groundwater function, that sort of thing. We have not gotten into the fine details of those, just sort of monitoring those things as well. Number 5 there, workforce is our workforce-oriented item. 2 things I'd mention there is a bill, House Joint Resolution 5, sets up an endowment, an $850 million, I believe, endowment for TSTC to address ongoing capital needs. So rather than the state every 2-year cycle doing what they've been doing, which is allocating a couple $1 million here for this campus, some amount for that campus, and spreading it around, just give them an endowment, let that do what endowments do, right? Accumulate a bunch of money, and then they can use that to expand operations or build new campuses, meet the demand that way. That got caught up in some political wrangling that was going on in the House. So every bill goes through what they call 3 readings. It's filed, and the first reading is they refer it to the committee. Second reading is when it comes to the House floor for a first vote, which is that May 15th deadline. And the third reading is typically the day after the second reading, and it's just sort of saying, we voted on this yesterday, we're all still good with this, yes or no, and then it passes, moves to the Senate. On second reading, that bill got 75 votes, which is enough to pass, but joint resolutions are constitutional amendments, and they require a 2/3 vote. So stakeholders on that bill scrambled for a roughly 24-hour period to see if we could help overcome some of those political obstacles. And the next day, that bill, for whatever reason, certainly the stakeholders played some level of role in that, but that bill got 129 votes. So well exceeding that 2/3 threshold of 100 votes, moving on to the Senate. And I think that has a committee hearing in the Senate on Thursday. So stakeholders are very pleased and optimistic with the progress that's making. OA has supported a handful of other bills, increasing funding for training programs, enhancing the effectiveness of the outcomes-based funding from last session on credentials of value, career and technical education, just building strong talent pipelines for target industries like manufacturing, nursing, several other things. The sixth priority, which is not on that sheet because it came up sort of out of the blue, is an item that aligns with our 5-year strategic plan. In that plan is an idea to create in the plan it's listed as a game changer item for the region. So it's to create an investment fund, sort of like a VC fund, I guess. Texas, despite having a strong tech and innovation ecosystem, lags in VC funding behind some states that you would expect and a lot of states that you would not expect. So our goal was to address that, try and change that. So in partnership with one of our investors, did a lot of research on the potential for a state to operate sort of an investment fund like that. There are apparently 30 other states that have done this. And as you can imagine, they're seeing returns that are higher than your typical putting it in money markets and bonds and things like that. And so the goal is to operate an investment fund that would provide early stage funding to innovative technology and critical infrastructure and defense companies that are based in Texas, right? Not investing in just anything that looks interesting, but getting the state a better return on its funds while also incentivizing and helping grow important critical business ecosystems for the future of the state. That conversation happened in like October of last year, and the general consensus at OA was this is a little too close to session to be launching an initiative this large. And then we learned that Dr. Bonin, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, had this same idea and had filed a bill on it. So we had about an hour-long conversation with him, have been working closely with his office to provide invited expert testimony in the House committee hearing that they had. That bill passed the House with over 100 votes on Monday. We'll move to the Senate. Essentially what it does is it takes $5 billion, which presently is, 18-ish% of the rainy day fund. So the state's emergency savings account, and allocates that for investments in this fund, which is structured to be apolitical, through a board of investment managers, and seek those higher returns and try and foster that innovation.
How is this different than the emerging tech fund back in the day?
Yeah, I think there's a number of differences that largely are in the way that it's structured.
Yeah, but that's interesting because the general issue with ETF was just we shouldn't be investing state dollars into startups. Position has changed.
That was, yeah, I think that was certainly a component of the conversation. I think that the structure of how that was administered and there was a lot of conversation about how this is intentionally structured so that it is done in an apolitical way, so that there is not a particular elected official or group of elected officials that are making those sort of decisions. You have certainly somebody has to choose the board members that are doing this, but you have these guidelines for who's going to be on this board that is overseen by the comptroller, and then they're going to have this very specific investment plan that they're going to do. And so I think some elements of transparency are probably where a lot of people would draw that distinction. And then outside of those top 5 priorities, just want to cover a couple of additional items of interest. So the SH-130 connector road that I know some of you all are familiar with, but has been a conversation for a while. There is a bill, I thought I had the bill number on here. There's a House bill that is moving by Representative Gertis from Bastrop The idea here is to create a mechanism for TxDOT to have an option for building a non-tolled east-west connector between SH-130 and I-35 in the southern part of the region to help facilitate the flow of various things, commercial traffic, people that want to get down to the eventual TSTC training opportunities down there, all that sort of stuff. We are hopeful the House bill will be on the House floor late this week, maybe early next week. So that's moving. Still a lot of work to do advocating for support in the Senate to finally, hopefully get that done. It's a big issue for us.
Yeah, we've been partnership, big way supporting that,
Can
obviously.
you explain that again? I'm
So-
sorry, like, what is, again,
So what it would do effectively is SH-130 would pay for the connector to be privately funded. TxDOT wouldn't pay for it. It would use TxDOT contractors, which has always been a big hang up. SH-130 is like, we'll pay for it and we'll build it and we'll do it, 3 times faster than TxDOT will. But as you can imagine, TxDOT contractors didn't like that. So TxDOT will run the project and do all of it, but it'll be privately funded. Most importantly, it will not be tolled. So that has been the hang up of Governor Patrick doesn't like toll roads. He's been very clear about that. And so as a lot of our state senators, Donna Campbell doesn't like it for the same reason. Kerry Isaac, we're going to have to get across the hump there too, which is where Kyle can help out with that too. But it would do a lot to alleviate this I-35 problem, right? But it's non-tolled, privately funded, east-west, and where it goes is up for debate. That's the bill that is silent on that. It depends where you can get right of way and for what cost and make it happen. I mean, our argument would be somewhere to Lockhart would make the best. That's where the 2 roads are closest. And anything farther north, you start to run into traffic problems. Anywhere farther south, you're really close to I-10. So somewhere San Marcos, Kyle, Yarrington, in my opinion, Yarrington makes sense. But to require that, to get it there, TxDOT has to extend the contract with SH-130 to operate the road. And that's the big rub is, okay, the connector's not tolled, but you just extended this lease, the SH-130 concession company. So it would be a toll road that much longer. And so that's what we're up against. And I mean, it's gotten we've worked on this last three sessions probably or more. We are as far as we've ever been, but we still have Governor Patrick to deal with. And I don't know how we're going to get across that hump, but we're going to fight the good fight until sine die and do that. So anybody knows Representative Isaac, please reach out. It would help Kyle too. Traffic would be a lot better. It would help as you guys, because we all work towards more projects in the area. Getting over to 130 is going to be more and more important to the future of this region. So it affects Kyle in a big way. It affects Hayes and Caldwell counties in a big way. So anything else can do, but did I miss anything on that? Yeah.
Logistically, the reason that this has been such an issue is that to reach certain points of the I-35 corridor, commercial or, like trucks or just us driving our cars, either we'll have to, off of 130, take the Southeast 45 connector over Utah, or if you're going to New Braunfels, somewhere further south, bring it all the way down, connect into 10, come over, connect into 35, and come back up. Now, if you have a bunch of trucks making freight deliveries and things like that, that's not really ideal for a number of reasons: efficiency, safety, etc. If you're going to locate your warehouse, factory, etc., whatever, somewhere in that corridor, you are going to look at those logistics and say, it's really difficult for us to get our shipments in and out. Isn't there a place we can do this better, or a way that we can do this better? So that connector would be the answer to that question. allowing that direct east-west connection without having to do either that strange interchange or making the long haul from all the way up in this area, which then feeds into obviously traffic problems here. And as someone who lives right near that Southeast 45, 35 connection, I would appreciate it.
But Yarrington was built for it. I mean, that's supposed to be main and main for Hayes County. And so Caldwell County's put a lot of money into environmental clearance through Maxwell to figure out preferred route. Can we get that through environmental and get it back over to 142 and into Lockhart? So that is the preferred location for us, for everybody, but it's SH 130 can't finance it without a longer timeline on that lease.
The last thing I would mention is the film incentives funding. So SB 22 is allocating $500 million towards the film incentives program. You've seen articles about the star-studded committee hearings that happened and various opinions on pros and cons of that.
That gives me hope for the road because again, 10 years ago, no freaking way we're giving incentives for movies. So we're getting there.
And so the House passed Senate Bill 22 out of committee on April 28th. That is working its way towards the House floor. But again, that is a Senate bill. So that May 15th deadline does not apply to that bill. I would imagine it'll be unlikely you see that bill on the House floor until that May 15th deadline has passed because the House wants to get all of its stuff done first. That will follow shortly thereafter, I would speculate. I took up far more of your time talking about the stuff than I intended to.
No, it's
apologize,
okay. I think it's very important. Spent much time talking about it. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. And-
Quick questions, if you don't mind. So, Matt, what can we do to help you be a better advocate for Kyle?
I appreciate that. So you have my contact info. You are welcome to email, call, or text anytime. I'm always available. When I worked outside of the government landscape, people would say, "Oh, work balance is a big thing." I said, "I'm from politics, where you get a phone call on Thanksgiving, like when's the turkey tweet going out?" So, whatever fits your schedule, just reach out to me. I'm available. But in addition to that, filtering, you guys are already filtering the work you do here in this room through Victoria up to us. And so just continue individually, but also through her to let us know what, your particular priorities are. I know you all have business interests in different parts of the region, in Austin, here locally. So helping us understand what your particular interests are, but then also the broader needs of Kyle and San Marcos and the rest of the region. We're in an information business, right? So the more that we know about what you're happy with, what you're not happy with, et cetera, that allows us to advocate.
And then Victoria, maybe in the June or July meeting, could we get an update on knowing where all the chips have landed from the session, what has changed, what hasn't changed, so we could be better informed of what options we have to play?
Yeah, we'll have a variety of different content or options for that information to be received, but happy to come visit anytime.
Thank you. You live so close, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Any other questions?
Thank you all again for the
Thank you
invitation. I
very
appreciate your
much.
time.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
let us know how we can help.
Yes.
I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll just work right up here and then. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so we'll jump back into the agenda here, and just a note on time, 8:56. So don't know if we're getting through everything in 4 minutes, but we can certainly
We can make it, I can make it quick. yeah.
expeditiously as possible.
Um, Let's see I think in your presentations, you have the sales tax receipts. So we are continuing to see compared to the budget projections, this year this month in April, versus budget projections, we were down 7.39%. So that's kind of the trend that we've been seeing the past couple of months. So we're keeping an eye on that, but it's kind of the way we're expecting it to go for the next several months. But compared to last year, we're still up 3.66%. So that's very bottom column there. But that's something that we're going to be expecting. Hopefully, we have a lot of new retail coming online over the next 12, 18 months. So hopefully those
Assume spending budgets are based on projected income. Are there cuts being talked about for the balance of the year to ensure that we are balanced?
I think for the coming budget year, we were told to look very closely at that. This was brought to our attention, that projections aren't where we had anticipated, and just to be more cautious, just aware of our budget requests for each department. So maybe a more conservative budget. Okay. Certificate of occupancies. Builders First Source has their temporary certificate of occupancy. They are along the frontage road on I-35. This is a relocation from Buda to Kyle. So this is a great project that the county supported us on incentivizing as a retention project. So we should see some sales tax generated from this project. It's a temporary CO just because they have to install their landscaping. Their medical company, ProCare Medical, and then Sovereign Flavors just expanded their lab, and then J. Reyes Auto. I once again invite all of you to attend if you can. I've sent out an invite, and if you can attend the May 20th luncheon, Kyle Chamber Luncheon. It's in honor of Small Business Month, and so we're celebrating by sponsoring the luncheon, and we're bringing in a very special guest speaker. He is he's a well-known author, and he's actually the president of the Wichita Falls Chamber. His name is Ron Kitchens, and this is again in an effort to kind of build momentum for our leadership program that we have been discussing for the past several months. So Ron was instrumental in creating a leadership program in his communities that he's been in, and actually even outside of Texas. So I look forward to his guidance and as we move forward our leadership program. Thank you, Eddie, for bringing up the next topic, which was the certification that I received last month. Okay, and then board member updates.
The Planning and Zoning Commission is looking to update the development code. And so if there's friction that we hear from developers or economic growth items, I'd love to put that feedback in.
Yeah.
And Eddie, thinking about past discussions we've had about landscape ordinances, things of that sort, if there are ways that we can identify where frictions are at, I'm happy to be that voice.
So next week, thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry, next month, the firm that is looking at helping with the code rewrite, I can't remember the name of the firm. Do you remember?
I don't.
Chance Sparks is the head of the firm. And they will be here presenting to the board. So that also might take just a little bit extra time. So I know, Luke, you typically have to leave at 9. So, but if the rest of you have a few extra minutes for that conversation, it'll be good. It's a way that, as you brought up some kind of pain points from the code, and I see some for small businesses that we can advocate for to help them and be even more business friendly. So that'll be next month, and I think we'll just have that take up the whole meeting so that we are not rushed at the end. Good. Okay. Do you want to give us an update on your?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to the voters, we're excited. We were able to have a firm 962 million of 968 total. So 99% of the value of the 5 props that we had passed. And so our economist tells us that that will lead to direct, indirect, and induced about 1.4 billion over the next 3 years for local and state business. So mostly I'm excited for our kids because they're going to get to enjoy all the new facilities, and it'll help us with growth. But also it does have a major economic impact. And so I was hoping that he was going to touch on House Bill 19 that would restrict counties and cities and school districts from having future bond elections and based on the debt ratio. And so might be the last one we ever have if that passes. And I don't know what people will do will do at that point, but hopefully it will die by the 15th. I know a lot of business people are behind the scenes working with Chairman Meyer about that and trying to get that shot down. But anyway, that's what we're looking at. But like, excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Very well. Very quickly, this next one, we don't have to go through every slide, but I did want to tell you for the next item, the council's new vision for the city. So they're going to roll this out over the budget planning process. They want to roll out their new vision. So if you just look very quickly at the screen, the council had a visioning workshop in March, and this is the new vision for the city they came up with. So Kyle aspires to be the undisputed regional leader in vehicular and pedestrian mobility, state-of-the-art parks, sports infrastructure, downtown redevelopment, and quality of life retail, which will augment a diverse, vibrant, equitable, and thriving community that families, neighbors, and businesses are proud to call home. So I love it. I think it's great. This will help. And, so we have an overall citywide strategic plan that is focused on meeting all of these visions. And I basically just wanted to share with you again the economic development key initiatives. And I wanted to just kind of talk through and see if you felt that these key initiatives from the economic development strategic plan met the vision of Kyle. Mike, I think this is also great for, as you go through your strategic planning process for the county, the 2-county footprint, knowing that this is Kyle's vision and how do we incorporate that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so maybe we can just kind of put a pin in this and bring it up at one of our next meetings. But I did want to share the vision with you. I think it's great, and we're all working towards that same. Any questions? All I had is that. Okay.
Okay, thank you everyone for making time. We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
say if you guys want to stay.
Thanks, Cassidy.
All in favor? All opposed?
Bye, guys. Thank you.
We're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
That was really funny. Can you introduce? Is like,
We're gonna-
I'm expecting to be like,
We
I'm
need a
not.
discussion on something.
Everyone on, it's actually a requirement for the board. Must be named downstairs.
It never happened.